Your hand is on your phone, ready to tap, confirm on something small. A coffee, a subscription, a pair of shoes you don't need. And then, for no reason you can name, you hesitate. Maybe you close the app entirely. Maybe you buy it anyway and feel a flicker of guilt that has nothing to do with your bank balance. You'll blame willpower or the economy or just having an off day. But that hesitation didn't start with you. It started decades ago in a kitchen you don't even remember. Listening to two people argue about a bill. Every time you spend money or refuse to, you're not making a fresh decision. You're running a script that was written into you before you could read a. Start with the man who gave that idea its name. A financial psychologist named Brad Klontz, working alongside his father, Ted Klontz, spent years studying why smart, capable people make the same self-defeating money decisions over and over. What they found is that most adults carry unconscious beliefs about money formed in childhood that they've never once examined. Klontz called these money scripts, and he identified recurring patterns across thousands of people. Some believe money is dangerous and to be avoided. Some believe money equals self-worth. Some believe more money always solves the problem. These aren't conclusions you reasoned your way into. They're inherited assumptions, absorbed the way you absorbed your accent and just as invisible to you now. Here's what makes this uncomfortable. You didn't choose your money script any more than you chose your first language. It was installed by watching, not by being taught. A parent who flinched every time a bill arrived taught you that money is a threat long before you understood what a bill was. A parent who bought something new every time they felt low taught you that spending fixes feelings without ever saying a word about it. You picked up the lesson through repetition and tone, the same way you learned that a certain look on someone's face meant you should leave the room. That alone would explain a lot. Klontz's later research went further, showing that these scripts don't just sit quietly in the background. They actively predict real financial outcomes decades later. Things like carrying credit card debt, avoiding retirement planning, or accumulating money compulsively without ever feeling secure. People who scored high on what he called money avoidance beliefs were significantly more likely to have lower incomes and lower net worth. Not because they lacked opportunity, but because some part of them had learned long ago that having money was itself a kind of danger to be quietly managed down. But it gets stranger. A researcher named Sonya Britt, who studies financial socialization at Kansas State University, looked specifically at what happens when couples carry different money scripts into a shared life. Her research found that disagreements about money were the strongest predictor of divorce among the couples she studied, stronger than disagreements about children's sex or in-laws. Not the amount of money involved, not even the specific financial decisions being fought over. The conflict itself, arguments rooted in two people running two completely different invisible scripts. Each one convinced their own approach to money was simply common sense. Sit with that for a second. Two people can love each other completely and still find themselves in a slow motion collision. Not because either of them is wrong about money, but because their childhoods installed different operating systems and neither of them realized they were running software instead of making judgments. If that unsettles you, the next piece should worry you more. A psychologist named Kathleen Vohs ran a series of experiments testing what happens to people's behavior when they're merely exposed to the concept of money, not given any, not asked to spend any, just reminded that money exists. In her studies, participants who were primed with money-related images or words became measurably more self-sufficient and less likely to ask for help, and also less likely to offer help to others. They worked longer alone on difficult puzzles before requesting assistance. They put more physical distance between themselves and a stranger they just met. The mere idea of money sitting quietly in the back of someone's mind was enough to shift how connected they felt to the people around them. That means the version of you standing in line, wallet in hand, isn't just making a purchasing decision. You're operating inside a psychological state that money itself switched on, one that makes you feel a little more alone and a little more self-reliant than you were 60 seconds earlier, whether or not you spend a single cent. You've probably assumed your relationship with money is something you built yourself through your own choices, your own math, your own values. That the way you save or don't, the way you avoid opening certain apps, or check your balance 5 times a day, or feel a small thrill handing over a card, are personal habits you consciously constructed as an adult. But that's not quite what happened. What actually happened is closer to inheritance. Your brain absorbed a small set of rules about what money means, who deserves it, and what it says about a person's worth. And it absorbed those rules before you had the cognitive tools to question them. By the time you were old enough to reason about money, the rules were already running underneath your reasoning, shaping which options even occurred to you as reasonable. Picture the scene again, but closer this time. Not the whole afternoon of shopping, just the half second before you hesitated over that phone. Somewhere behind your eyes, without any words attached to it, a small alarm went off. Maybe it sounded like a parent's voice from 30 years ago, tight and clipped the exact tone that meant money trouble was in the room. Maybe it felt like a tiny door slamming the specific reflex of someone who learned early that wanting things was dangerous. You didn't consciously retrieve that memory. Your nervous system just replayed the feeling attached to it, the way a smell can put you back in a room you haven't stood in for decades. Or maybe the opposite happened. Maybe you bought the thing instantly, almost automatically, chasing a small hit of relief that has nothing to do with the object itself and everything to do with a much older lesson that spending is how you soothe a bad feeling. Either reaction, the hesitation, or the impulse is the same mechanism wearing a different mask. Both are money scripts firing exactly as they were trained to. This is where it gets uncomfortable because it means your entire financial personality, the parts of you that feel most like personal virtue or personal failure, saving carefully or spending recklessly, being generous or being guarded, were largely assembled by people who were themselves running scripts they never examined either. Your grandparents handed something to your parents who handed a version of it to you, each generation convinced they were teaching common sense rather than passing along an unexamined inheritance. Think about how this plays out in your actual life. The friend who insists on splitting every bill to the exact cent and the friend who always grabs the check are probably not making calculated choices about fairness or generosity in that moment. They're likely replaying a rule installed decades earlier about what it means to owe someone or to be owed. The coworker who negotiates every raise aggressively and the one who never asks for a raise at all may be expressing the exact same inherited belief about self-worth, just from opposite directions. One learned that demanding more proves your value. The other learned that wanting more is shameful. Neither is running the numbers. Both are running the script. Even the way you talk or refuse to talk about money with the people closest to you traces back to this. Households where money was discussed openly tend to raise people who can name their own financial anxieties out loud. Households where money was a forbidden topic whispered about after children were sent to bed tend to raise people who feel a wave of shame just opening a banking app without being able to explain why. Notice too how the script survives contact with contradicting evidence. Someone raised to believe money is dangerous can go on to earn a substantial income and still flinch at spending it, still feel a low current of guilt sitting in a savings account as if security itself was somehow suspicious. Someone raised to believe spending equals love can go on to understand intellectually that a gift doesn't prove affection and still feel a hollow, anxious pull toward buying something whenever a relationship feels shaky. The script doesn't update just because the facts around it change. It was never built out of facts in the first place. It was built out of repetition and emotion absorbed at an age before either could be questioned, which is exactly why it keeps outvoting your adult reasoning decades later. Which raises the real question, not how do you become better with money through sheer discipline, but which inherited rule is actually steering the decision you're about to make. The people who eventually change their relationship with money aren't usually the ones who found more willpower. They're the ones who managed to catch the script mid-sentence to notice the old voice, the old door, the old flicker of relief, and ask for the first time, whether that rule was ever actually theirs to begin with. Your hand is still on your phone. The price hasn't changed, but now you know exactly whose voice you're really listening to.